Hey, everybody. I am excited to welcome our guest today, Mr. Ryan Tate with Rogue Pest Control. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing good. Appreciate you having me.
Man, good to have you here all the way down from, Huntsville, Alabama, maybe a little north of there, right?
Yep, just north of Huntsville.
Brought Ryan in today to talk on a topic that is super fresh on both of our minds right now. An event that Ryan invited me to a few weeks ago, which was incredible. And I'm not going to steal your thunder, but it was an opportunity to attend a leadership event that I had not really planned on attending. And graciously, Ryan and his team had a spot open that I was able to fill last minute. And from the very first speaker that came on to the very last one, I've never been so engaged in an event, taken so many notes, and have probably spread the cheer of this event to about 50 people the next week. But it was simply amazing, and we're going to talk about it today. So Ryan, if you don't mind, just share with the listeners who you are, your background, and let's talk a little bit about that, and then let's talk about this awesome event and how it came about.
Sure. Well, yeah, I'm one of the owners of Rogue Pest Solutions currently. Worked many years at Wayne's Pest Control here in Alabama. Before that, worked at a regional company, and then in 2023 left Wayne's and did a little consulting for a little while as I set out a non-compete, and then jumped in with my partners at Rogue. And so just kind of been trying to go through the struggles of being an entrepreneur and build that business. But we had met the Founders Advisors, which is a group out of Birmingham, a couple years back, and had invited us to a different event. We went there, and there's a lot of good leadership stuff there. And then a few weeks prior to this Factor Forum happening, we got a text message from William Gray. Shout out to William at Heritage Ministries, who also works with Founders as well, saying, "Hey, Founders is putting on this group or this meeting with the group from Highlands College." And I thought, maybe that's something we'll look at. Send me the information.
Right.
He sends the information over, and the names on the list are, Chris Hodges and Erwin McManus and Donald Miller and Dave Ramsey. And you're like, my goodness, how did they get these people? How much is it?
All-star cast.
Yeah. How did they do this? And so anyway, I was looking to folks to ask to come, and the rest of one of my partners could go. The other one, my other partners were all tied up and couldn't go. So, that's when I called you and said, "Hey, would you like to go?" I think the Lord had it kind of worked out and went before us on that, because as much as you were taking notes, I know me and William were there doing the same. So.
Absolutely, man. And what's crazy is I've been going to these kind of events, leadership things or industry events, and not just, like your trade association events, but more like business development, leadership, or sales or marketing, things that make you better at your skill and your craft. The last few years, I haven't felt that fire in my belly that I used to have going to these kind of events, and almost to a place where I even feel a level of guilt, because I've always been that guy that was taking all the notes. I'm engaged. I feel like every speaker is talking to just me in the room. And again, I saw that the lineup of speakers. I'm like, man, this is an all-star crew. I need to do this.
For sure.
So you mentioned these speakers. How is it as a small business owner? A lot of our listeners, are small business owners in the pest industry or not. Tell me about that struggle of like, hey, do I have time to take myself out of the day-to-day operations? Because I'm sure your to-do list is a mile long like mine. Go take yourself out of operations for a day to go do this. You should, but does it really take priority? How'd you handle that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest struggles we have, is waking up every day and where is the best place to put our time. We're stewards of our time every day. So trying to decide where, not just good places, because there's plenty of good places to spend our time, but where's the best place to put that time? And so it's really easy to get caught and just operating the business. And so when, the text came through, the call came through to go, that my first inclination is I don't have time to do that. Also, what you said, I've been sit through these before and I've been to them. But, I guess I would say that God really in that moment was like, man, well, it's hard to fill up your team from an empty cup kind of thing.
Oh man, yeah.
And so in my prior career, had a lot of time to do a lot of leadership development stuff. The previous owners of Wayne's, Stephen and Eric, spent a lot of time pouring into us. And I think that was a big part of my growth. And so I really feel like I owe that to my team to do that back. So that's kind of the approach that I had, and was so thankful once we got there, how impactful it was that we went and really it was an awesome thing to see that many business owners there wanting to get better, wanting to grow as leaders, to be good stewards with what God has given us.
No doubt, man. And man, you just said something about how can we go empty our cup if our cups aren't getting filled? I mean, it's spot on. And again, it goes back to the old, I know I need to work on the business, but I'm stuck working in the business so much. And so I think it was a good refresher. I know my staff is, sick of me telling all the stories and stuff, and Mike and Danny and I, our service center leader and team leader here in Auburn, we went to Byron's breakfast a few weeks ago, and literally I pulled this thing out and I started going through some different things that are just so powerful. And so we've set the stage for how we got to this place that day. We've gone through the speaker lineup, and let's see, Pat Liccione. I
Yeah,
mean,
that
like
was huge.
unbelievable. And Chris Hodges, again, it was held at Highlands College. Talk about how that impacted you and what some takeaways and maybe the subject of what that was about.
Sure. Well, I think he let out, really made it simple to follow, but he let out with success is having a successor. And, that whole concept of we can only go so far if we're not going to multiply ourselves.
Right.
And, the value of finding the right people to put around you, of casting the right vision to those people, or before that, I guess, modeling the right
Modeling,
things,
right.
then choosing the right people, casting the right vision, all of those things. But it really, came down to we can't go far without a group of people with us.
Right.
That old saying of if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so I think, that's what he was saying, that as leaders, we've got to be building up that next generation. And it starts with, you know, seeing those people seeing in us something
Hmm.
that they want to follow. So we've got to, model the right things. And then he talked a lot about this process, and it reminded me of something that my granddad did. But he talked a lot about the first thing you got to do is model what to do, and then he talked about we got to choose people to do that thing with us. So whatever we're doing, and then we've got to do that thing, and then let those people we've chosen do it with us.
Right.
Kind of helping us along. Then he talked about we got to take those people and we do the task together, but we let them lead and then we just help them. And at the end, we're just observing them doing it, giving them pointers. And it reminded me, I did a slideshow on leadership a few years ago. It just hit me about how my granddad taught me when I was a kid. And he raced horses, and not the expensive Kentucky Derby horses, but the county fair uh, horses that you have sulkies behind, and harness horse racing is what
Okay.
it's called.
Okay.
So it's maybe the low end, more redneck version of that. I don't know, but I spent a lot of my summers with him in the in county fairs in Kentucky, us racing horses and traveling from fair to fair, training, taking care of horses, and he taught me a lot about work. And whatever my granddad was teaching me to do, he would say, "Hey, let me come show you something."
Mm.
He'd let me watch him do it. And then if it was cleaning out a horse stall, he'd hand me the pitchfork and say, "Okay, now let's do this together."
There you go.
And he'd be leading it, doing most of it, but I'd have a pitchfork and I'd do a little bit. And then he'd say, "Okay, now you take the wheelbarrow over there, you have the pitchfork. I'll do a little, but you do most of it, and I'll help you when it gets too heavy. I'll lift
Mhm.
it, I'll do this for you, whatever." And then he'd finally say, "All right, you're going to do this one by yourself. Let me watch you do it." And the model that Chris put out there was the model that my granddad, he was a great teacher. He's passed on now last year, but he was really good at teaching. And that's why, he kind of followed that example of, you choose who's going to help you
Right.
do
Right.
it with you. And then you show them how to do it. Then you do it and they help you. They do it. You help them, and then you just watch them do it. So that was a real full circle moment for me, thinking about what he was saying and how I'd seen that kind of live out my own life.
No doubt. And if you really think about it, that's not a new concept. It's not a new earth-shattering thing that he spoke on, the 6 different steps, but it was framed in a way, just like you just framed it with your granddad, that is easy to understand. And so the question is, as leaders, whether we're leading a company, whether we're leading a division, or whether we're just a leader as a peer, as an employee, right? Like we're on leadership or have the ability to be in leadership in different ways. Why don't we do that? Why, if we heard that and we're like, well, yeah, that makes sense. Why don't we do that as leaders? Is it because maybe we're too busy trying to tell people what to do so we can run on to the next thing? Or like, why do you find we don't do that maybe as we should?
Well, I think, and me and you've talked about this in the past, and just talked about it before the podcast started. I think the urgent sometimes takes precedent over the important,
Mm,
and we know that spending time with our young leaders, or the next generation of leaders, or our field pros, or whoever it is in your business, spending time with your people is going to keep you from doing X, Y, Z, these
yeah,
other things you need to do to be productive. But when we prioritize the urgent over the important, we lose in the long term. Win in the short term, maybe that day, but we lose in the long term. So I think it's just losing sight of that if it's important, that's what we as business owners should be focused on, not just the urgent. And you say that, and I know as both of us sit here, there are things that tomorrow we're going to choose the urgent over the important. And
right.
sometimes you have to, but you've got to make time to pour into that next generation. So I really think we don't do it because there's there's not a pain point in the moment, something urgent jumping up and down saying your guys aren't coming to you saying teach me,
Right,
or
right.
your gals. So you got to really be disciplined and make yourself do that.
So it's maybe being a little bit more proactive than reactive. I talk about that a lot. So step one. So let's go through all six again, right? So number one, it was I do it.
Yeah.
So explain that one again. So step
So
one, I do it.
I do it is, what you model every day. You're modeling, you're living out what it looks like to be that leader in the organization. So they're actually seeing what they're going to be expected to do. Maybe to your point, where I think before they even know they're going to be a
There
leader,
you go.
they're seeing that modeled out in front of them.
So
So
doing things with excellence, doing
that's right.
intentionality, those things, right?
Yeah, being whatever, your core values are, living those out. Whoever you're trying to be, if you say something that you're going to do something, you do it. If you say that we are this as a company, you hold yourself to that
Mm,
standard. And you I think one of the big things that we want people who are able to own up to their mistakes. So I think that's something we got to model
yeah.
that, right? Hey, I really messed up here. One of the best things that a gentleman named Alan Ritter taught me, who was a mentor of mine, still is, for many years while I was at Wayne's, was he said, be comfortable raising your hand and saying, hey, I'm an idiot. I messed up, but I think that transparency of I'm a human, I mess up, but I'm striving for excellence
Absolutely.
is modeling that every day. If you're not modeling it when you get to telling people to do it, it's going to fall on deaf ears.
It reminds me, and I've read this in a book or heard it in leadership podcasts, and I'm sure you're going to recognize this quote that I'm about to tell you. But and I know my dad used to say it, and I know it came from a good place when he said it when I was younger. And all you listening, you probably heard this several times, especially when you're little. But it's do as I say,
That's
not as I do. So your dad, you say, well, dad, well, I see you doing chewing tobacco, or I see you said a cuss word, or I see you didn't pick up your towel off the floor. And that reaction is, well,
yeah.
do as I say, not as I do. And I think that's probably the complete opposite of what this is saying. We can't get to this is 6 steps we're going to go through, but we can't get to step two
Mhm.
if we're not doing number one right. So how are we going to ask somebody to do something if we're not doing it with excellence ourselves? So number two was I choose people to do it with me, right? So number one, I do it. Number two, I choose people to do it with me, which is basically like I'm recruiting, right? So now I got to recruit somebody.
I think that was a huge part. And I asked myself at that moment is, number one, have I chose the right people? Like right now, if I look around my team, have I chose the right people to do this with me,
Mm,
to bring on? And I think that's something that you got to ask yourself, right? But I think identifying those things, if you take the things that you're trying to model and you start trying to identify those things in those people, and look and always be recruiting. That's one of the things he said on there is he's always looking for the right person. And some of the things he said that really spoke to me, obviously he had the Steve Jobs quote in there that talks about that we need to go and go to exceptional lengths to hire the right people, right? And that's huge. But what do we actually look for? And one of the things he said was to don't just look for current ability, but look for potential. So
yes.
I've struggled looking at who people are instead of, yes, think about who they are, but also thinking about who could they be.
Mm,
And so I think for me, when it comes to choosing people, I can't just look at just who they are now, but what does their potential look like? Maybe they can get the task done today, but they're not a person who can get to that next level. And
right, right.
are they a person that'll eventually be able to multiply themselves? So
Absolutely.
I think it looks like always looking for that waitress or
Mhm.
that waiter or the person selling you a pair of tennis shoes, the kid that's graduating high school that you know their parents and they're a good kid that doesn't know if he wants to go to college or not. Realizing that all of those are potential opportunities that
For
could be
sure.
that next right person, and if you're only looking at the resumes that come across your desk
Yep.
and not opening your eyes and looking at all the people around you at all times,
Absolutely.
you're missing opportunities.
Not going to find most of our good people on Indeed. That's
Yes.
a tool.
Yeah.
We've found some really good people, but that's just a tool in the chest, right? So I choose number one, I do it. Number two, I choose people to do it with me, which is recruiting. And it says communicate a vision that people want to join.
That's right.
Right. So number one, as leaders of the organization or our department or whatever, we have to have a clear vision. And I think it's a lot easier for me to recruit. I know for our company today, when I can speak with certainty what our vision is, where we're going, who we are, what do we believe in. Whereas, 5 years ago, man, it was like, well, here, I think we want to do this. I think we want to, we want to go down this path. And it gives you a level of confidence when you can do that. Um, and
Yeah,
that's
I think
good.
one of the things that made me really think about the way I, look towards people and their potential is said, and this, I've always thought this, but I'm maybe scared to say it out loud. He said to prioritize attitude over aptitude.
Yes.
So it's a lot of times attitude is just something that you automatically see. It's not a number on a page, right? You look at two different technicians and they both in the pest industry, maybe they both get the same amount of work done, but one of them does with a frown on their face and they're grumpy about it and they kind of suck the life out of the room,
Yes.
and your customers feel that too. The other guy gets the same amount of work done, maybe even a little less, but every room he walks into, it lights up. Every customer that talks about him, they light up.
Yeah.
And so to really realize that value a lot of times starts with attitude, having the proper perspective. And uh, he used an analogy of of Winnie the Pooh, I think, and talked about
That's
Eeyore
right.
versus Tigger,
Yes.
and man, you'll ruin my day pretty quick. You put me in a room full of Eeyores,
Right.
that will ruin my day. You put me in a room full of Tiggers, and I'm ready to conquer the
There
world.
you go,
So,
man. Dude, that's so spot on. I mean, in the past, I mean, you mentioned that I could think of a particular situation where I had to sit down with one of our people. And I said, "Look, you're doing great on your stops. You're doing, you're not getting the most 5-star Google reviews and feedback from customers, but you're not costing us anything either, right? And you're by all means, you're doing an average job. You're what we hired you to do, right?
mhm.
But if I had that, then I had someone who's doing exactly what you're doing now, but they're doing it with a great attitude, and they're coming into the office every day, not with what am I going to complain about, but what value can I drive to others in this room that I'm about to walk into. I'm like, if I had to choose between those two people, I'm choosing this one 1,000% of the time, right? And if we set a standard of excellence within our organization, our department, our companies, people have to know when we hire them, right, that just doing your job is not what we're looking for. We want you to do it, but with a great attitude. And now it's going to make it a little bit easier for us to train and coach that part, which that's number three. It kind of talks into I do it and they are with me, right? So again, number one, I do it. We're modeling it. Number two, I choose people to do it with me. That means I'm recruiting people to now come on. Now, once I got them on board, I do it and they are with me. What does that mean to you?
So I'll try to use this one and think about an actual real life example. When I was in prior part of my career, we got to the place that I really felt passionately about choosing the right people and raising up the next group of leaders because we were growing so fast. I felt like we needed to. And so a part of doing that and creating, I was a supervisor at the time, so we created these roles called field captains. And so they were still responsible for a lot of production, but they were the folks that we were really grooming to be the next supervisors, maybe service center leaders in our organization. And one of the first things that I did is I had those guys come in with me at the end of the day, and the kind of watch me do it. Part of it was I would call my cancels at the end of the day. So all the people who had canceled that day that weren't an urgent cancel, that they're mad about something, if they needed addressing, I would do it throughout the day. But when they'd get back in, I'd have 2 or 3 cancels there, and I would call those cancels, and I would close my door. I'd say, all right, sit down, let's just listen.
Right.
Put them
right.
on speakerphone, and hey, Miss Jones, hate to lose you as a customer. Got a cancellation request. What can we improve on next time so that we don't lose a customer like you? And let them
Right.
talk through that, and let them really hear what it's like to try to empathize with the customer, try to win that customer back and keep them from being a cancel. And before I knew it, after doing that 3 or 4 days in a row, you could tell very clearly those guys were like, let me try it, let me do it. And that kind of gets us, I guess, to the next step where they would step in and do it a little bit. So.
Absolutely, man. So you're doing it with them. And I told you before this episode, I was super guilty with our insurance business years ago. Like, I need salespeople, I need service people. And so what do? You go and hire. And first you're just throwing up against the wall, see what sticks. And then you get to the point, all right, I need to probably screen a little better, probably need to recruit a little better. So that we got better at that. Now we got the right people on the bus. And now here's what I was guilty of. Get them licensed, get your basic training that you need to get on the computer and do software. Then you kind of throw them in a cubicle and like, go get them, Tiger.
Yeah.
I got 10 other things. So this is the step that I missed out on. I was really good at doing it myself. I was really good at, choosing people and recruiting. But step 3, I went through a good 2 to 3 year period where I really sucked at step number 3. I mean, I was not training them. I kind of threw them out there, or like, go watch these tutorials. Therefore, I could never develop a leader if I missed that step. And that's a great example. So now they're doing it, right alongside you. And that now goes into, so these guys that, you're doing these cancellation calls, they're listening, they're hearing all the objections you're going to get. They're hearing the tone, they're seeing what works, what doesn't, right? And they're silently building confidence. But as opposed to if you just threw them right in there, we all get nervous doing something we've never done before, right? So we've now trained them. Some of the notes I says is say what you see, right? And you see people as they could be, not as they are, right? You start a development process with them in this phase with the training. So now we've modeled it, right? We've recruited, we're training somebody, we're showing them, which look, we fall in that trap. Man, we got customers to service. We need to go hire a service professional, a technician, get them in the truck tomorrow.
Yeah.
But we've missed out on all this training and coaching we talk about. Why do we do that sometimes as managers or business owners? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, when we get to the place that we're hiring quickly, we're way more apt to make a mistake. And I think for efficiency's sake and comfortability's sake, sometimes we as business owners push that hire until the last minute, right? And when you push those hires to the last minute till you just can't do another stop, or maybe I could go out and catch 3 or 4 on my own. That's what I'm kind of guilty of that part of it. Well, if I take this, then I won't have to make that next hire. When if you would just hire a little early,
Right.
if you think it's coming in 2 months, you need to hire a guy in 2 months, you probably need to try to hire him this month.
Right.
And I think anytime we take more time to choose those people and not just get yourself in a pinch. When you get yourself in a pinch, we've all made hires. I tell a story. My supervisor right now in our Huntsville area now, Josh, was a install guy for me in the past. And it was the middle of the summer, and he was killing himself on installs a few years back, and he needed help, and we couldn't find a good fit. And, I was interviewing people, they weren't the right fit. One afternoon he came in, after sweating all day, running an auger all day, doing Centricon installations, just, backbreaking work, really.
Sure.
Ground was super hard. He said, man, I don't care who you get me. We just need a warm body. I need a body. And that next day, I fogged a mirror. And let me tell you, he was barely a warm body. And so we always joke about my worst hires have been when I've gotten a pinch.
Absolutely.
So that's how it works, right?
When you're backed into a corner, man.
Yeah.
And so we're training them, and now we get to a point where you mentioned with your granddad, he's showing you he's shoveling, right? And now he gives you the shovel or the pitchfork or whatever you're doing. So this is number 4. So they do it and I am with them. So number 4, they do it and I'm with them. Whereas number 3 was I do it and they're with me. So this is the coaching part, wouldn't you say? This is the coaching part. So we've gone from being trainer, you know, to now being a coach. So how does that hit home to you and what where you are in your business and throughout your career?
Yeah, I think that that shift is really important to get into the place because this is the spot where I think we as owners of a company, entrepreneurs, we want to just get stuff done. We want to do it ourselves, and maybe we'll even let them watch us do it, right? But this is the point that we got to begin to trust
Mm,
and give a little control away, which for me can be hard, right? I mean, it's hard to do that because these are my customers, this is my livelihood, this is our business. But I think this is an important step, not only in that person's development, but to say out loud to that person, hey, I trust you. And I trust you enough to hand you the phone. And using our example earlier, calling customers, now I'm gonna call 3 and you're gonna call 1, and really try to allow that person the freedom. You've told them that you begin to trust them by identifying them, by spending time with them, and now you actually put them, to use your analogy, you're putting them on the field and you're standing back as a coach. And I think one of the mistakes I've made that I wrote down here was, don't take it right back from them. If they get in the middle of the conversation and they start stumbling, don't jump in, jump
mhm.
in and say, "Hey, Miss Jones, this is Ryan. I
That's
know."
hard to do, right? If
Yeah,
you're a control freak too,
that's
if
right.
like you want it
Well,
done
you feel
right.
like, well, I just want to keep that customer.
Right.
Well, if you end up losing the customer, but you have this training moment that you're able to
Teachable
walk
moment.
through, this teachable moment with this guy or this gal, that you're able to say, hey, let's go back over that. Let's help you through this. Don't say this. And I remember many times in this stage, the customer would be talking about their problems, and I would walk over and I would push mute. And so the customer may be talking. This is probably a terrible thing. I don't know if I should be sharing this, but the customer would be talking, and sometimes you get those customers that keep going, and I would go over and I push mute so the customer couldn't hear us, and so I wouldn't take it from them, but I'd start coaching them. I'm like,
Right.
okay, you hear how she's saying X, Y, Z. Well, why don't you counter that with
There
this?
you go.
And then you come off mute, and that guy, and you can see it in the guy's eyes. He's like, I don't know if I want to say that. Trust me.
Trust me.
Hit him with this, and look. Don't be passive with this. Be very firm with this. And they say it, and the customer responds positively. And you've had that moment now,
Yes.
another teachable moment that's positive. So, I think, I guess the one thing I'd say for myself is I just got to keep leaning on myself to hand that trust off. Let them do it.
Right.
Make this transition, and don't hold on to the phone call too long yourself.
Yep.
If they're ready, hand it over. So,
Absolutely. And that's the opposite of what I shared earlier, that what I did. I just gave them the basic training and threw them in the
sure.
cubicle. And I don't care how good you are and how talented you are, especially if you're new to the industry or the position, you're not getting set up for success, right?
No doubt.
And so I think that that is absolutely huge. And a few of the other notes I made in this section, step 4, was the um, that's when you're asking them, in that stage, like, if it's John who, that you're now coaching, you were training, now you're coaching him, giving him enough rope, let him make some mistakes, right? And that's maybe where you get in their head and you're like, hey, what do you want to accomplish? That was one of the things, like what do you want to accomplish in your role, and where's your future? Like, really showing them that development opportunity for them. But we don't know that unless we ask them questions, right? Know, like, what are their dreams? What are their aspirations? Because it may not be to go become a supervisor. They may just want to be the best at what that is. A lot of times you realize you take that next step in development or career path, and you're like, I really don't like managing people. Like, maybe I'm better suited over here, just kind of working in isolation in my lane over here. And the other thing, and I don't know if I could tell this story, so I'm going to put you on the spot to see if you could tell it. But there's a story that they told on this section. It was talking about the lowest slat in the bucket. Do you remember that?
I don't think so. Or maybe my mind didn't remember it, so I don't have to
So,
say it.
all right, so I'm gonna see if I can butcher. I
Okay.
was hoping you would butcher it, or you
No,
took a lot better notes of me. But
no.
if you think about it in the coaching aspect, right, you're always gonna have certain people on your team that are gonna be better at, they're just more talented or more whatever, right? Not everybody's gonna be Michael Jordan on your team. By the way, you got to have Scottie Pippen. You got to have these guys over here, in the supporting role, or But I think the analogy, and I don't even want to butcher it, but I'm just going to call it the lowest slat in the bucket. But basically the essentially what it was talking about. You look at a wooden bucket, right? And you have these individual slats that are that turn they go around in a circle to make this bucket. And let's say that all your slats are even length, but you have one that's a little bit short, right? So it's a little bit short, and we're trying to fill this bucket all the way up to the top. But we can't ever quite get the water up to the top because there's that one slat that's low. So we keep pouring water into the bucket, i.e., the whole team, the company, but water keeps coming out, right? Well, what do we have to do? I'm assuming this is what they meant. I hope nobody was there listening to this because it probably had nothing to do with what they were talking about. This is the way I interpreted it. We got to get that slat up to the right height, right? So we're not leaking, and we do that through coaching, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think, the idea of, you're only as strong as your weakest link kind of idea. And for us to realize that it is our job to coach people up or coach people out, right? And that's a hard thing for, I like to be liked, so you saw me hesitate. I don't even like to say that out loud, right? I'm adverse to saying that, but that's the truth. We've got to coach people up. And if we're putting the time, effort, and energy to coaching those people,
Hmm.
then there's no reason if we've chose the right people that they shouldn't be able to take that next step. They should be moved up in that analogy. But in a world that we're doing everything we're supposed to do to lead that person, but they're not elevating, they're not moving up.
Right.
I think we've made a mistake in who we've chosen, and we've got to go correct that, loving them somewhere else.
That's right. And that's the thing. We can't go to step 4 where we are now if we didn't do a good job of step 2,
Yeah.
which is find the right people. There's a lot of times I know I've had really good people, they had the will, they had the skill. So we say when those two things combine, right, they can want it all they want, but if they don't have the God given gift and skill to do whatever they're asked to be done, it's not gonna, it's never really gonna be ideal, right? Same thing. If they have the skill and they have the talent, but they're not willing to put in the work to do the standard of excellence, whatever that requires, then that's not gonna work. So when you have the will, you have the skill, but maybe you don't have that leader who has developed and trained and coached, gone through these steps. I've I'm I've missed out on a lot of good people. I've been really good at step 1, 2, and 3, and got to the coaching part, and I didn't do a great job.
Hmm.
And in hindsight, you learn, from those mistakes, hopefully. So that rolls into step number 5. Okay, so we'll go back to number 4. They do it, and I'm with them. So that's the coaching aspect. So now number 5 is they do it. So they do it is all about empowering, right?
Mm.
So what does that mean to you? That they do it?
I think that's us taking another step back, right? And trusting them even more. They've done a good job thus far. So I'm going to step back and I'm going to give them room. I'm going to trust. I'm going to give them room to make mistakes, mess things up, but also you're giving them space to thrive when you do that, right? So you hand those to them and you give them that task, of maybe calling those cancels on their own. And now as they call them, maybe you step back and you say, "Hey, tell me how that went. I noticed that of the 5 cancels you called, all of them are still cancels." So that's kind of the metric, maybe in that analogy or that example that I would track, or I did with my guys is, "Hey, you had 5 cancels to call. You called all 5, and all of them are still cancels. Let's talk about what we could do." So at this point, you don't just walk away from them, right? But you're watching them do the thing. You're stepping back. You're letting them do it, giving them that space, but you're also there. And if you've done a good job to this point, I think you almost become that mentor.
Mhm.
You watch And they even said it in this leadership forum. Somebody had mentioned it that there are different roles in every movie that you watch, or every
Right.
story. And
Oh, yeah.
there's a mentor. That person in this story, I believe, is the hero. It's their journey, right? You're helping them grow into the leader they can be. And at this point, you're just that mentor. They don't need moment by moment micromanagement.
Right.
What they need is those 1 or 2 moments a day or a week that you can speak into them, that you
Mhm.
can give them that advice. And one thing that I wrote down on my notes as a personal thing here, if at this point they're not coming back to you for advice, you probably have missed a step here.
That's a good
You
point.
haven't built trust, or maybe they think, or maybe they have passed you, and because they've worked so hard that they're better at it than you are at this
Right,
point.
right.
So what good does it do them to
Yeah.
come to you? But you may have messed something up if they're still not coming to you when they don't have to. If they're
Mhm.
still not coming to you for advice at this point, maybe you haven't continued to build that trust in the right
Right.
way. But I think it's real important in this step to, again, like the last step, pull back, trust, give them room to make mistakes. And as you do that, you're giving them space to really step into who God wants them to be.
There you go.
So,
Absolutely. So we're empowering, our people. We are letting them, giving them the space because we let them make mistakes in the coaching period, right? So we let them make those phone calls, but now, there's a level of trust. Like, hey, I entrust you. I empower you to go lead that program of cancellations, right? And I'm going to take myself out of it. I'm here as that mentor. I'm Mr. Miyagi, right?
yeah.
Like Daniel's son now is empowered. I'm Mr. Miyagi. I'm that mentor. And some of the notes I had on this section, right? So that's where we encourage creative thinking. So that's where you can really let the horse run, right?
Mhm.
Because they've got to, if you're hiring the right people, your core values, you're hiring a bunch of strategic thinkers and creative people. So like, if we hop in there and do it and fix it for them, we're not giving them the opportunity to get that creative side. It allows leaders around you to challenge the process.
Mhm.
That's not always easy, right? So if we're empowering them, we're allowing them to challenge the process we have. And we talk about, I know here all the time, like when we fall into that, hey, why do you do it that way? Well, it's the way we always did it.
Yeah.
It's going to take, like, one of our core values is embrace change. But what happens if that person comes and they start questioning it? And we're like, no, no, just do it this way we've done it. Like, but we have to allow them to challenge. How does that apply maybe with your experience when you've been able to give someone that ability to challenge sort of the status quo or the way things have always been done?
Well, I clarify one thing that I've heard him say several times, and I think it was his point here is we got to allow people to challenge the process, to challenge the procedures,
Mm-hmm.
the how we do it. We never allow people to challenge the vision.
Right.
So we put it in a bucket that we've got this overarching vision of where we're going as a company or an organization, and that's not up for grabs,
Right.
right? That's been set.
Right. Right.
Whether it's a church, a business, a sports team, the goals and the vision, big picture, those have been set.
Yeah.
And so, as a leader, you don't get to change or challenge the vision, but you do get to challenge and change the processes.
There you go.
So I think it's real important to clarify that, to speak into, look, we're open to change here, but we're not open to change everything. There's some
Right, right.
non-negotiables here
Right.
that we got to hang on to. But I think one of the things there that I've felt at as a leader, Rusty, is I have allowed people challenging the process to feel like they were challenging me and my authority. And so when I do that, I tend to put them off, say things like we've always done it that way, or you don't know what you're talking about,
Right.
or you don't totally understand it, instead of stepping back and trying to hear that person. Because a lot of times those people have a better idea than I do. And if I'm not humble enough, if I'm not self-aware enough to know that the processes, whether I put them in place or my teams put them in place, that they're not perfect, and that there's room to grow in that. And I guess the security in what Chris Hodges has said here, but then in other things I've heard him say, is that it's okay to challenge the process, because we're not going to let them challenge the vision of
Right.
where we're going, and that is protected. But we've got to hold these processes, these procedures with a loose hand. Now, that doesn't mean that we take every idea that they say,
Right.
right? Just because every idea is not a good idea,
Right.
right? So we don't just take every idea, but if it's a good idea, we're open to listen to it and let them begin to build on it.
Absolutely, and I think that is empowering them. And look, I'm not always the best at it, because you got to create an environment where they know they can say, not just for their voice to be heard, but you want to create that environment where they're wanting to come up to you and give that feedback. But if you shut it down, even though you're saying we welcome feedback, but as soon as they say it, you don't give them the time of day to listen to it or a forum to get that off their chest, they're going to interpret that as he doesn't care or she doesn't care. So I think that's probably more of a challenge is how do we create that environment to where they feel like they're in a safe place
Mm.
to give that feedback without feeling stupid or feeling like it's just going to get overlooked again. Right.
Learning to listen.
Absolutely.
And that's hard. I think that, and also knowing when you're there are voices, and as the owner of the company, your voice is probably a lot of this. That when you speak on a subject or give your opinion, a lot of people are going to hear that as the gospel, not as
Mhm.
your opinion as adding to the conversation, but they will treat it, and listen for this in your meetings. If after you speak, it's nothing but silence, and you thought you were just adding to the conversation, but nobody else will talk after that, that's a sign that they're reading that you said this is the way it's going to be, and so they can't add to it. I was a very wise man told me that one time, and I began to listen to that and realize, I've got to learn that when you're the loudest voice in the room, you need to be really careful of how you kind of wield that power, and make sure that you don't speak too soon, because you might stifle a good idea somebody else has.
Boy, that one just hit close to home, man. I'm guilty of that. I mean, for sure. I mean, that's a rider downer. So for my leadership team, if you're listening to this, you can go thank Ryan for pointing that out to me. So give him a high five when you see him next time. But man, that's good. So let's roll on to number 6, and we'll kind of wrap up on this one because man, I feel like we could talk about each one of these for a day. Let me recap. So number 1, I do it. Number 2, I choose people to do it with me. Number 3, I do it and they are with me. Number 4, they do it and I'm with them. Number 5, they do it. Right. So that's where we left. And number 6 is they do it and someone is with them. So now they're doing it and they've got somebody with them, which is basically reproducing. Right. So it's the next generation we've developed. Now they're starting the process with the next generation, right? So kind of share that with us, the reproductive part of that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think something for us to think about as business owners, Pastor Chris is in a Christian environment, and he is mentoring a lot of pastors. So when you're mentoring pastors, you're automatically mentoring people that have the gifts of teaching, and multiplying kind of comes naturally to them. So I think this is where we kind of got to take aside and realize that for him, the pool that he's swimming in is probably everybody has those gifts.
Right.
But as a leader of a bug business, everybody doesn't have those gifts. So we need to make sure, going back to who we choose matters, is you can choose people who are really good at doing what they need to do. But we're talking here about choosing people that can ultimately lead,
Mm,
which means they can communicate, they can teach, they can inspire other people. So you really got to look for that, who other people that other people are automatically drawn
right.
to, or you're never going to get to this place. If it's not somebody who wants and has a desire to lead and does not naturally draw people to themselves, then you're going to probably end up being frustrated when you get to this point that they're not going to. So just make sure that as you're selecting people, you're selecting people that actually want to be those leaders,
Right.
who want to multiply themselves and who can communicate, because all it takes is one generation of the people we multiply into not being able to take the business to the next step. And
Yes,
what I would challenge you is, this here is the problem why businesses don't last more than one generation usually,
for sure.
because you don't multiply to people who will then go and multiply.
That's right. Or
It's a tough one.
you pass it on to the kid and they want to because of whatever reason they feel like they're supposed to, or maybe it's good money for the family and they're doing it for that reason. But if they don't buy into that long term vision, I think that's absolutely right. I think the development piece doesn't mean you have to have manager in your title to be a leader, right? So to my point earlier, if you're in sales or you're in a service role, at the end of the day, what matters? Like, are you in your lane? Are you getting paid well, for the value you're creating? And are you happy? Right? You don't have to be a manager and a supervisor to do that. I want to develop our people with obviously more income opportunities, but I want them to develop skills, lifelong skills that they can take if they do go onto another path down the road, or they can take with them, or maybe something that they can take and maybe integrate it within their own family, right? I mean, there are things I learned as a leadership from that conference that I absolutely apply to our business. But man, I'm taking it to my family. I'm taking it back to the house with the wife and kids, right? I mean, wouldn't you say a lot of these things kind of apply, in personal relationships too?
Yeah, I think my wife's name's Candace. Candace is tired of hearing about what happened at Factor Forum. She was very attentive for the first 3 days, but I think as I've continued and as I was preparing notes yesterday on the back porch, you could tell she was kind of growing tired of it. But to your point, 100%. I think I have 4 kids. Two of them are in their teenage years, and the other two are younger. So they're at different stages of trying to help them be who God's created them to be. Trying to pass these things along to them is definitely something that I came back pretty charged up about. So yeah, I think it definitely applies. To your point earlier, all of us are leading somebody somewhere somehow, and these principles can be applied to that.
Man, that's awesome, Ryan. As we wrap up this part of the series, man, thank you for number one inviting me. So for whoever couldn't make it, that I was able to slide in and use their ticket, I appreciate it. Not working out, but now we gotta go pay it forward and obviously get them to the next one. But and thanks for inviting me. Thanks for your leadership. Thanks for your friendship, man. Thanks for being able to share this experience, which I think is now probably impacted, besides just our wives and the people that have to listen to us, I think other people that we've shared this with, and I think the reach is going to go a little bit further with our listeners today. So hopefully we'll have enough time that we can get another one of our topics in. But I think this was a big one, man.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and thanks for going with me. It was a good time.
Absolutely.